Canelo Alvarez, super middleweight king, Mexican legend, cash cow, respected and feared amongst his peers. Crawford, skilled, undefeated, but always the underdog, the hope of Omaha. The fight is supposed to be tough, but most think Canelo will come out on top. Few believe Crawford has a chance to pull it off, but I believe he has more than a chance. I believe he might destroy Canelo. Canelo's fights usually start off pretty slow, waiting for you to jab at him so that he can come back with a big hook, trading jabs and probing punches for power punches. But this usually means that he's pretty inactive for most of the time until he scores with a big punch. But is the power worth it in exchange for so much inactivity? While getting pushed back, leaving his opponents to score for most of the round. Getting pushed back, unable to get set to throw his big punches, and occasionally getting hit, losing points. But not all is lost, because he does have one thing. He throws big power punches to counter his opponent's jabs and probes. It usually works out for him because he's usually the bigger puncher. But is the exchange worth it? Because he has to give up so much space and so many punches for the chance that he lands his big one. But he has a few more tricks in case his opponents try and put a bit more pressure on him. To stop his opponents from just unloading on him, he throws a few combinations himself, makes his guard a bit tighter, and does not take a step backward. He's trying to make the space between him and his opponents that much smaller to put a lot more pressure on them as the big power puncher. This doesn't always work out for him though, as it also leaves him open to some offense. As the fight slows down and his opponents throw single shots, this is where he shines. He gets to block and parry punches and then counter with his big hooks. He exchanges small little jabs for his big power punches, and that benefits him greatly. Sometimes he can even hold his opponent's heads down to throw these big hooks. This measured, slow pace usually works out for Canelo. Without any jabs or combinations to control him, Canelo's opponents are usually sitting ducks. When it comes to one punch at a time fighting, Canelo is its king. But is this style of fighting enough to stop? Right out the gate, we have Crawford throwing a lot of jabs, a lot of probes, trying to get a reaction out of his opponent. And not just throwing his jab to score, like Munguia did against Canelo. The jab here, waiting for a reaction from his opponent, waiting for a counter. Boom, the counter comes. Now he has some information. And then he has counters to those counters that he set up in the first place. Already a different element from what Canelo was going through. Jabbing and circling, taking little steps back, making it hard for his opponent to just get the jump on. A step back, a probe, step back, getting a real good look at you, and countering. But it's not all perfect. When he tries to put some pressure, sometimes he's open to a few counters himself. Getting clocked while trying to follow his opponent back. And sometimes he gets a bit complacent with his control and probing and is open to hooks while he's trying to feint and look for information. Hooks that Canelo himself could land. But Crawford, ever resourceful, has counters to his opponent's counters, making it hard for someone like Canelo who only throws one punch at a time. He gets into a good game of counter-punching with you, but if that's not enough to discourage you, he does have a few more tricks up his sleeve. He starts probing and feinting even more, keeping a jab right in your face, not giving you time to breathe or time to get settled to throw a punch. Keeping the pressure on you. Inching forward. Taking less steps backward. Putting more pressure on you and on the line. Very difficult to fight. A bit harder to counter. As you can see, his opponent's output has lessened quite a bit, and his countering options are a lot less now, especially with the jab. But it's not perfect. As he's trying to bully you and move forward, he is open to hooks, especially for combinations. Something that might not bode well against Canelo, but might not be too much of a worry, since Canelo is a one punch at a time kind of fighter. Crawford, always making adjustments. If he gets countered, trying to stay on the line too long, then he starts throwing combinations while getting on and off the line, putting a lot more pressure on the boxing. Taking a few steps back, throwing a single counter, or taking a few steps forward and throwing combination. It can be a lot to keep up with, especially if you're not fast. of which Crawford's opponent, Kowalski's here, is pretty fast. A lot faster than Canelo typically is. Now he's controlling you, throwing his counters, and throwing counters to your counters, giving you very little space to fight him. And if somehow that's not enough, he has even more. If by some miracle you survive the boxing onslaught, Crawford might take a card out of Canelo's book and just put his guard up and start throwing hooks in an attempt to put pressure on you, to bully you, to show you his strength. And this can be a lot to deal with, especially since he himself is usually the bigger puncher. But it's not a perfect strategy because it leaves himself open to counters as he's just standing still in front of his opponent. Something that could really work out for Canelo, someone who loves standing in front of his opponents and throwing bombs. And while this style of fighting could still benefit Canelo, there are still places where he could be at a disadvantage. Because Crawford is a combination puncher and a more consistent power puncher, whereas Canelo is a one punch at a time kind of guy. So while he might land big shots, he might give Crawford too much time to land more consistent punches. So now, by some miracle, you survived the boxing onslaught, you survived the counters, and you survived the combinations. So, Crawford pulls all the tools out of his bag and puts them all together to make you tired, to make you wane, and to make you now he feints you to get your counters out so that he can combination counter those counters while barely moving back, putting so much pressure on you. And even if you can occasionally hit him, he gets right back on the line, keeping the pressure on. And he is still open to hooks, but you have to be very consistent with your offense. A consistency that I don't think Canelo has. He's still feinting you, still throwing jabs, while still throwing combinations, while still boxing, still countering you, still inching forward, yet moving back slightly. And honestly, for most opponents, this pressure is just too much, and they drown. Look, Canelo is always dangerous. He has a decent guard, so he doesn't always take all the punches, and he hits pretty hard. So the few times he does land, he gets a lot of returns. But his offense is just too inconsistent. Are the few times that he does land enough for him to stop Crawford? Or is Crawford's more consistent pace and power just too much to handle for a guy who only fights one punch at a time. I'm not too sure that it is. And I'm not too sure that Canelo is that much bigger than Crawford.